30 people.
Yeah.
In just 3 to 4 years of operation, the business we are analyzing today, Super Kleen Laundry, has churned through approximately 30 different employees.
It's a massive number.
I really want you to just sit with that number for a second, because that isn't just, standard turnover. That is a revolving door spinning so fast it's practically generating its own weather system inside the facility.
Right, and it is staggering when you visualize it like that. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you look at the industry baselines for service businesses, this isn't an anomaly at all.
Totally.
Yeah, it's actually the standard. It perfectly represents what we call the manual grit reality. You spend weeks finding the candidate, then weeks training them, and then poof.
They just vanish.
Exactly. They aren't a culture fit. Or the physical labor is just too demanding. Or they simply ghost you. Then you fire them or they quit, and the entire cycle resets from zero.
And that reset button is incredibly expensive. It keeps an owner trapped in the store, covering shifts, plunging toilets, and folding sheets, instead of actually building the business. But we aren't here to just complain about the labor market today. We are looking at a specific, a what-if scenario from the Living Lab that completely flips the script. What if you just stopped hiring employees? What if a laundromat didn't have staff in the traditional sense, but instead dispatched gigs, kind of like Uber or DoorDash?
That is the core question. We are looking at a radical shift in labor economics here, moving away from a traditional employment model directly into a dispatch model.
Welcome to the Audio Lab, the technical briefing for the modern laundromat architect. I'm your host, and today we're diving into another experiment from the floor of Super Kleen Laundry. We're moving past the manual grid and looking at the precision operations that actually scale.
And this really is about precision. We are analyzing a proposal by the precision laundry architect, Nicholas J. Gomez, to fundamentally alter the architecture of how labor is acquired and paid. This isn't just about, hiring better. It's about moving from a fixed cost burden to a variable cost asset.
Let's unpack that a bit, because variable cost asset sounds great in a boardroom, but it's harder to visualize when you're actually standing in front of a bank of washing machines. We have to start with the friction. Why is this pivot even necessary? I know the source material describes the current labor pool as raw and messy.
Yeah, raw and messy is probably a polite way of putting it. The data coming out of the Living Lab, that's Super Kleen Laundry located in Lake City, Michigan, it highlights a very specific pain point for operators.
Seasonality.
Exactly. Seasonality. Lake City is a rural market. So in the summer, the lakes are full, tourists are everywhere, Airbnbs are booked out, and the laundry volume is absolutely booming. But in the winter,
It falls off a cliff.
it completely drops off. So you have this classic business dilemma. In a traditional model, you have full-time staff. You have to pay them in January when the store is completely empty, just to guarantee that you keep them around for July when it's packed.
Which is just a trap. I mean, that is what we call unproductive consumption applied to labor, right?
Yes.
You are paying for hours where literally zero revenue is being generated.
Yeah.
But here's the catch-22 for the owner. If you cut their hours during the winter to save money, they quit. They need a living wage. They can't pay rent on half hours.
Right, they walk. So the owners, Nicholas and Rebecca, are stuck. They want to focus on commercial account acquisition, growing the big B2B contracts, which actually drive valuation. But they are tethered to the floor. They are filling shifts just to ensure a customer-first experience because the staffing is so volatile.
This leads to a concept mentioned in the blueprint called system latency. And I want to drill down on this because usually I hear latency when I'm talking about bad internet connections or software ping times. How does this apply to folding clothes?
Well, it operates on the exact same principle. System latency is just the delay between a signal, which is a problem, and the response, which is the solution. In the context of hiring, the latency in a traditional model is massive. Let's say a key employee quits today.
Okay.
It takes you 2 weeks to post ads and run interviews, then another 2 weeks to train the replacement. That is a 1-month lag where the system is effectively broken.
And during that month, the owner is the one filling the gap. They are dragged right back into the manual grit.
Exactly. Which means the owner isn't doing high-value work. They aren't architecting the business. They're just operating it. The latency prevents scalability because you are constantly patching holes in the hull instead of steering the ship.
So enter the scenario, the laundry gig model. This is the part of the deep dive that really caught my attention because usually when we talk about gigs, we think of outsourcing to TaskRabbit or some third-party app. But the proposal here isn't to use an existing app. It's to build a proprietary database.
That is a crucial distinction. The architect isn't suggesting outsourcing the platform. He's suggesting architecting a totally new workflow internally. Here is the blueprint for how this works. Super Kleen collects a pool of potential workers. Names, phone numbers, people specifically looking for side hustles in their local area.
Okay, so they build this list. It's sitting in a database. Walk me through the mechanics of this. How does a pile of dirty laundry turn into a gig?
The digital infrastructure kicks in. Imagine a commercial order comes in. Let's say a local Airbnb host drops off 40 pounds of linens. That order is immediately tracked via the point-of-sale system, which is Clean Cloud in this case.
Got it.
That incoming volume is the trigger.
It's like a bat signal, but via SMS.
Effectively, yes. A text goes out to that proprietary pool, job available, 40 pounds of laundry, commission is X dollars. The first person to reply and claim it gets the gig.
I want to pause on the payment structure for a second because this is where the economics really shift. You mentioned commission. We aren't talking about hourly wages here at all.
No. And that is the magic variable in this entire equation. It's commission-based. It is a strict percentage of the order value.
Which completely changes the math for the worker. But I have to play devil's advocate here. We hear a lot of horror stories about the big box gig economy, DoorDash, Uber, Instacart. People grind all day and barely break even. Why would a worker choose to fold laundry on a commission basis instead of driving Uber?
Because of the hidden costs of those other platforms. We call it asset depreciation. If you drive for Uber or deliver for DoorDash, you are burning your own gas. You are wearing down your own tires. You are racking up miles on your personal vehicle. The take-home pay is significantly lower than the gross pay when you factor in that you're slowly destroying your car.
That's a really fair point. I mean, I rarely calculate the cost of my tires when I drive to the grocery store, but if I'm driving all day, that math adds up fast.
It eats your profit margin entirely. But with the laundry gig model, there is zero vehicle wear and tear. You drive to the facility, Super Kleen Laundry, and you use their machines. You use their water, their electricity, their soap. It is pure labor income.
Yeah.
For someone seeking a side hustle, the net profit on their time is likely way higher than driving cold food around Lake City, especially in the winter when the roads are treacherous.
Right. It utilizes the facility's infrastructure, not the worker's personal assets. That makes a lot of sense. But let's look at the logistics of pulling this off. You can't manage a fleet of gig workers with sticky notes and a whiteboard. If you have 30 people in a database, that's a logistical nightmare to manage manually.
Impossible. You'd spend more time texting people than you would actually folding the laundry. And this brings us to the technical implementation. The sources outline a very specific software stack found in the technical blueprint of Super Kleen.
We mentioned Clean Cloud as the POS. That's the trigger. But how do you actually manage the humans?
The blueprint references a tool called Homebase. Currently, most laundromats use it for standard scheduling and time blocks for W-2 employees. But in this scenario, it acts as the dispatch hub. It's the interface where the gig is broadcasted and claimed. It handles the who goes where question, so the owner doesn't have to play traffic controller all day.
Okay, so Homebase handles the staff, but there's another piece of tech here that I think is actually the unsung hero of this operation. The notes mention Bella or Hey Rosie.
Yes, the AI receptionist. This is absolutely critical for the architect mindset. Because think about the workflow here. If Nicholas, the owner, has to answer the phone, take the order, write it down, calculate the price, and then manually text the gig pool, he hasn't saved any time at all.
He's just changed his job title from folder to dispatcher.
Exactly. He's still in the loop. He's still the bottleneck. He's still in the grid. But Bella handles the intake. The AI answers the phone, it answers customer questions about pricing, it takes the commercial order and inputs it directly into the system. The architect doesn't have to touch the transaction until the money hits the bank. The gig dispatch becomes the only human touchpoint required to actually do the physical work.
That is a wild shift in responsibility. The AI takes the order, the software dispatches the human does the wash, and the owner is presumably working on the business strategy.
Or enjoying that target 10-hour work week that is really the holy grail of this entire project.
Right, but wait, I have to push back here. We're talking about laundry. It's not just moving a sealed box from point A to point B like a courier service. There is an art to folding. If I drop off my favorite cashmere sweater and some random gig worker who just claimed the shift 5 minutes ago is washing it, how do we know they aren't going to shrink it to doll size? Quality control seems like the biggest risk here by far.
You have identified the single biggest failure point in this scenario. In a traditional model, you have weeks of training and oversight to ensure that sweater is safe. In a gig model, you need speed. The source material addresses this head-on with the concept of the super clean way.
Is that just a fancy employee handbook? Because nobody reads the handbook.
No, it has to be way more than a handbook. This relies on standardized operating procedures, or SOPs, but they have to be highly visual and instant. The magic variable here, the thing that determines if this succeeds or completely fails, is training efficiency.
Meaning, can you train them fast enough to make the commission model worth it?
That is the metric. If it takes 3 days to train a gig worker, the model fails. The math just doesn't work. You need a system likely video-based, AI-assisted, or highly visual that can onboard a worker in minutes, not days. They need to walk in, scan a QR code, watch a 30-second video on how to fold a towel the super clean way, and execute it perfectly immediately.
So it forces the owner to have immaculate documentation. You can't rely on tribal knowledge or just telling someone, hey, make it look nice. You need an exact blueprint.
It forces the business to become radically structured. You cannot have ambiguity in a gig economy model. Ambiguity leads to ruined sweaters, bad reviews, and refunds. The architect must design the process so clearly that the variable of human error is minimized, even with a constantly rotating cast of workers.
Let's pivot to the money side of things. We touched on commission, but let's dive a bit deeper into the financial architecture. Why does this model excite a precision architect so much? What does it actually do to the profit and loss statement?
It creates a direct, unbreakable link between revenue and cost of goods sold, or COGS. In a traditional payroll model, labor is a fixed burden. If you have 2 employees on the clock at $15 an hour, you are paying $30 an hour, regardless of whether you are washing 1 load or 50 loads.
So if it rains all Tuesday and nobody comes in, you're losing money every single minute the clock ticks.
You are bleeding cash. You are destroying your efficiency per cycle. But in the gig model, labor becomes a strict percentage of revenue. If there is no laundry in the building, there is no labor cost. 0. But if there is a massive influx of commercial work, the labor cost scales perfectly with the revenue.
It protects the profit margin. It effectively guarantees that you can't lose money on labor.
Exactly. It creates a guaranteed margin. You know that for every dollar that comes in, let's say 20 cents goes to labor, and the rest covers your overhead and profit.
Right.
You completely eliminate the variable of unproductive consumption of labor hours.
That's huge for scalability, because one of the things mentioned in the notes is the fear of burning out the core staff. If you land a huge client, usually you panic because your current team can't handle it.
Right. Imagine Super Kleen lands a massive commercial account. Say a local hotel needs 500 pounds of linens washed overnight because their in-house machines broke down. If you only have 2 full-time staff members, you're going to break them. They physically can't handle that surge. They will burn out and quit.
And you can't hire a new full-time person just for one night. That's impossible.
But the gig model allows for elastic labor. You can absorb sudden influxes of work by blasting the signal out to the gig pool. Maybe 3 people show up to tackle that 500 pounds together. It allows the business to scale its output instantly without increasing the permanent workforce footprint.
It also acts as a really interesting proving ground, doesn't it? Because hiring is usually such a gamble. You interview someone, they sound great in the room, and then they show up and they're terrible.
That's the secondary benefit here that I think is vastly undervalued. Hiring is a guess. But if you have a pool of gig workers, you get to see who shows up on time. You get to see who folds neatly. You get to see who takes pride in the work.
And who ignores the text messages or does a sloppy job.
The data speaks for itself. The best gig workers, the top 1%, can eventually be offered those reliable full-time roles if the business grows enough to need a core management team. You're essentially auditioning your future staff while they're actively generating revenue for you. It drastically reduces the risk of a bad hire because you have hard performance data, not just an interview impression.
It's flipping the funnel. Instead of interviewing and hoping, you're dispatching work and verifying.
It aligns perfectly with the entire brand mission we talk about. It's moving from gut feel, I think this guy's a good worker, to data-backed decisions. I know this person is a good worker because they have successfully completed 50 gigs with a perfect 5-star rating.
So let's zoom out for a second. We've got the tech stack, clean cloud, home base, AI receptionists. We've got the financial model shifting from fixed to variable costs. We've got the elastic labor pool strategy. What does all this ultimately mean for the owner, for the architect?
It goes back to the core identity found in the source documents. The goal is the 10-hour work week. The goal is financial freedom through pure automation.
And avoiding the manual grit. Because I think a lot of people get into this business thinking it's quote-unquote passive income and then realize they essentially just bought themselves a low-paying job as a janitor and dispatcher.
If the owner is the one dispatching laundry, or folding laundry, or losing sleep over whether the attendant showed up for the morning shift, they are not an architect, they are an operator. This laundry gig experiment is an attempt to automate the most unpredictable, frustrating variable in the entire business: human behavior,
By turning it into a
by
marketplace.
turning it into a precision system. If this works in the lab, if Super Kleen can prove that a laundromat can run with a hybrid workforce of minimal core staff and a flexible gig cloud, it completely changes the industry.
It really does. It provides a template for other owners, especially those solopreneurs, to maximize ROI without that heavy, sinking anchor of a traditional payroll. It makes the business so much lighter on its feet.
And it allows them to survive in markets that are heavily seasonal or unpredictable. It makes the business model truly resilient. If a recession hits and volume drops, your labor costs drop with it automatically. You don't go bankrupt paying staff to stand around in an empty store.
It's fascinating stuff. It's taking a model we see everywhere else, rideshare, food delivery, and applying it to a brick-and-mortar utility business. It feels inevitable, honestly. And it makes you wonder, what if this gig model evolves? Like, what if it becomes a localized B2B labor sharing network?
How do you mean?
Well, imagine non-competing service businesses sharing the same local pool. What if a gig worker folds laundry at Super Clean in the morning and then does prep work at the local bakery in the afternoon, all running on the same localized dispatch protocol? It completely redefines how small towns employ people. Something to mull over.
In the lab this week, we aren't just looking at theory. We're testing the magic variables, those small technical adjustments that professionalize your staff and protect your profit per cycle. Whether you're driving to your facility or folding a load, let's break down the technical blueprint.
That's the data for this deep dive. If you want the exact prompts we used in this experiment, or to read the full case study, head over to ai4laundromats.org. Make sure you're subscribed to the Lowdown newsletter so you never miss a Monday briefing. Until next time, stop putting out fires and start building your architecture. This is your host, and this has been the Audio Lab.